To jump into this week's parsha, but also we would be remiss if we did not mention that this is a very special day on the Hasidic calendar, because today is Chai Elul, the 18th of Elul. Now, why is that such an important day? It is the birthday of both the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Both were born today. Both the founder of Hasidism in general and the founder of Hasidus Chabad were both born on this day, obviously not in the same year, but they were both born on the 18th of Elul. Now, I would say that it is a point of as everything in Judaism is, everything is divine providence, but it is easy to see the direct correlation between these two individuals who had their birthday on this day and the fact that it occurred on the 18th of Elul, that the date that is their birthday is the 18th of Elul. We know this, and the number 18 is a very important number to us Jews because the 18 is Chai, right? It's really pronounced Yud Chet Elul, right? That's the way we generally count it. But we say, we're going to flip the letters and we say Chai Elul, because Chai means life. Chai Elul, the day that brings life and vitality into the month of Elul. Now, what's that mean? Well, Elul, as we've been talking about for a while now, is a month of significant importance. You cannot have the month of Tishrei without having the month of Elul. We have two poles of the year. The month of Nisan and Pesach on one pole, and Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the high holidays, on the other. And what the difference between the two of them are defined by two very similar, but actually opposite verses in Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs. Right? The month of Nisan and Pesach is defined in Shir HaShirim by Dodi li va'ani lo. Right? Which means, my beloved is to me, and I am back to him. Which is exactly the narrative of Pesach. The Jewish people were in slavery, in captivity, were not able to get out. They had sunk to an incredibly spiritual nadir, all the way down, 49th level of impurity. They were this close to being past the point of no return, and God swoops in and heroically saves them with great miracles and signs and wonders. And he initiates this whole relationship that we have with him. And our role that we play after Dodi li, after my beloved comes and takes me, right, and saves me, is va'ani lo, that we then respond and we reciprocate, so that when God says, Lech teich acharai b'midbar, follow me into the desert, we said yes, and we trusted him to do so. And which we get credit for. We get credit for responding correctly to God's initiation. So there was the Dodi li, God begins the whole thing, and we respond, and we follow him, and it is a beautiful love story where our beloved initiated, and we responded, and followed him even into a desert. But then we come to the other pole, the period of the year that we're approaching now. And the script flips. It's ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. We initiate. Mm-hmm. And that is why, of all what happens in this month, in this period, God pulls back. And he says, I'm not going to force my relationship on you. I'm not going to force my sovereignty upon you. I could, right? I have the strength, I have the power, I have the right, and I have the merit. And one would even say, I have the justification to do so. Not just justification because I'm the one who created you and I am the quintessential definition of a king, etc. But also because God knows better for what's good for us than we do, right? Which is the ultimate argument that every tyrant makes erroneously, but says, I have to impose my will because I know better for the people, what's good for the people, and the people know for themselves, right? In the one case where that's actually true is God. So, could God impose his sovereignty upon us? Without a doubt. And yet he doesn't. He pulls back and he hides himself, as it were. And he waits for us to choose him. That's Rosh Hashanah. That's the blowing of the shofar. We blow the shofar and we say, Meloch ala olam kulei b'chvadecha, God, reign over the world in your glory. We choose you. Which is why Rosh Hashanah, of all the holidays of the year, falls out in the first day of the lunar cycle. Right? It's the only holiday that is such. Most of them fall out in the middle, when the moon is at its fullest, at its brightest, when the celestial body is shining forth in a way that you can't ignore it. Rosh Hashanah, the moon is non-existent. Right? It's the very beginning of the lunar month. It's non-existent. For a moment, it blinks out of existence, as it were. It doesn't, of course, but it's not revealed. It's hidden. And that's Rosh Hashanah. Why? Well, David HaMelech tells us why. Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chavgenu. This is such an important verse about Rosh Hashanah to the point where it actually becomes the way we make a kiddush. It's the verse we use for the kiddush, right? On the day of any given holiday or on Shabbat, the kiddush is only a rabbinical injunction. We make the kiddush, the Friday night kiddush or the holiday night kiddush. That is the kiddush that is fulfilling the mandate to make the day holy. We make kiddush on Shabbos day or on a holiday day as well, because the rabbi said every time you're kind of sitting down to a big meal, you consecrate the day and you make it, and you acknowledge it. But we don't make a bracha on the day like we do by the night kiddush. By the night kiddush, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, right? Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzabanu v'shabbos kadsho v'kadesh Hashem Baruch Atah Hashem v'kadesh Shabbat or Baruch Atah Hashem v'kadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. Right? That we do. These are the blessings we make on the night of each of the holidays or on Shabbat. By the day, we just quote one verse that is quintessentially defines this particular day, either Shabbat or the holiday, and then we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Borei Pri Hagafen. So we quote a verse from the Torah or from Scripture that signifies the importance of the day, and then we say the Borei Pri Hagafen. What is the verse that on Rosh Hashanah day that we use to define the whole nature of this day? So many aspects at play on Rosh Hashanah, right? So many things. It's a day of judgment. It's a day of repentance. It's a day of coronation. What point do we highlight? Which verse do we highlight to sum up the day and then say the Borei Pri Hagafen? And the verse we choose is Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chagenu ki chok liYisrael hu mishpat l'elokei Yaakov sarim arnam Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Borei Pri Hagafen. What does that verse mean? Blow Tiku b'chodesh shofar. Blow the shofar at this moment in the month. B'keseh l'yom chagenu, when it is hidden on this day of our celebration. When what is hidden? And it's a reference to the moon. The moon is hidden on Rosh Hashanah. Why is that so important? Why is that so worthy of acknowledgement? Because when the moon is hidden on the day of Rosh Hashanah, that represents God's celestial sovereignty. God hides himself. Not himself as much as, in a sense, the beam of his sovereignty over the world. He pulls back because he's giving us space to initiate. This is the Ani Ledodi to God's Vidodili. So we initiate, and then God Once we say Ani Ladodi, we choose you, then God steps in and He gives us the day of repentance of Yom Kippur. He gives us the days of joy of Sukkot. He brings the rain in its time. So God, when we choose Him, then God makes good on that choice. That's His reciprocation, the Dodili. But in a sense, the whole point of Rosh Hashanah, the theme of the Rosh Hashanah is the Ani Ladodi, that we are choosing God. And importantly, you can't just show up in your pajamas for this special moment. If you are being given the opportunity to choose God Himself, to reign over the world, He's giving you that amount of trust. And the relationship means that much to Him, that it matters so much to Him that we choose Him. That should invoke within us such a passion and a desire to be there, to step up to the moment and be our best. And so, the month of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, does not begin with Rosh Hashanah. How dare it just begin with Rosh Hashanah? Rather, we take an entire month to prepare. Not because we're concerned that if not, God is going to smite us or give us a bad year. It's not as simplistic as that. It's the beautiful idea that God, if you're giving me a chance to make this moment, I'm going to make a moment. I'm going to be there in my finest of finery, my spiritual finery. I'm going to be worthy of this moment. And so I'm going to get started a month in advance. The month of Elul. The month that will sum this up, which is, as we said, Elul is Ani Ledodi Vidodi Li. That spells, the first letters of that spell Elul. Because that's what's on my mind the whole month. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And what do we do? It has always been age-old Jewish practice that the month of Elul is that month in which we engage in this very quintessential Jewish practice of introspection and self-refinement. That has always, to a certain degree, been the definition of a Jew. Striving always to be better, to fix our wrongs, to double down on what's good, to never take it for granted, but to constantly work on ourselves, to be working on this project that is ourselves. That is very quintessentially Jewish. That's Elul. Has always been the case. But there's many ways of doing this. One is you can be very calculated, approach this like a good accountant. You sit there and you make an accounting of exactly things that you could have tweaked and done a little bit better, and where you have a deficit in your mitzvah observance, and where you potentially have a surplus, so that it all kind of balances out. Maybe I could do a few more minutes of Torah learning on a Sunday, or I can do this mitzvah. I can give a little bit more tzedakah this year because I made an accounting. I helped up my books against my Torah giving. My mitzvah doing. So come very cold, calculated, and make sure I can execute a little bit better in my Jewish practice than the year before, which is very laudable and a beautiful thing. But honestly should not be the extent of the period of introspection and self-refinement that you go through, is to approach it as kind of like a cold-blooded accountant. There's another approach, which is to really give it to yourself, to realize how much better you must be, because how low you currently are, how much of an embarrassment and shameful being you are. Look at you think you have the right to show up before God on Rosh Hashanah. Look at you. You're crass. You're low. You're a person of an indulgent nature. You don't look where you're supposed to. You don't look in the sitter. You're looking at other things. You don't focus on the davening. The business. You lie. You cheat. You steal, and not in big blatant ways, but maybe you're a little bit not honest on your taxes, and maybe you lie a little bit to your friends and exaggerate things. So, but ultimately, you're a liar and you're a cheater and you're a stealer and you're not a good person. And so, ultimately, shame on you. Shame on you. And so you give it to yourself over the head, and you realize you humble yourself and humiliate yourself, and you bring shame upon yourself because again, You are very, very, very far from perfect, and perhaps very far from a righteous person. There's all these approaches. And then you have the Hasidic approach. The life and vitality that the Baal Shem Tov and then the Alter Rebbe introduced into this effort of Elul, which is that you're not doing this because, as we said, you're concerned that God is sitting there with his ledger, and if he finds you wanting, that he's going to mete out consequence accordingly. And that if you weren't as perfect as you should be, then you're going to get it. Oh, are you going to get it? Or you're not going to get it. That thing that you want to get, you're not going to get. To illustrate, rather, what the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe didn't introduce, but reintroduced, brought about a renaissance, because Hasidism is not something that never existed in Judaism. It was actually always a vital aspect of Judaism that somehow we detoured from. And the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov returned us to it. Right? This connection with God, this positive and warm and chassid connection with God from chesed, from the word chesed. To make this point, I'll tell two stories of Reb Shmuel Munkes. Reb Shmuel Munkes was a very colorful chassid of the Alter Rebbe. He was a very joyful, very witty, and he gave over his lessons or his messages in a kind of way that could very oftentimes be a humorous, which makes him one of the most beloved Hasidic figures for Hasidic children all over the world. His stories are oftentimes fun. So here are two stories. First story is that he was on his way traveling from his hometown to spend Tishrei and Rosh Hashanah with the Alter Rebbe in the city of Liadi. And on his way, he was passing through towns. So the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, he ends up in a small town full of simple but pure-hearted Jews. And that Saturday night was going to be what we call Motzei Shabbos Slichos. It's going to actually be this Saturday night as well. It's the Shabbos in the lead up to Rosh Hashanah. We start the process of saying Slichot, and we don't, most of the times you say it in the morning, but the first time, which is the first Saturday night of this process, you say it as early as you can. As soon as midnight tips into the next day, you say the Slichot. You get there showing God your enthusiasm to do this, and so we say Slichot right away. So it's called Motzei Shabbos Slichos, the Slichos of Motzei Shabbos. Now, he watched as this simple, kind-hearted, pure-hearted Jew that was hosting him for Shabbos was already starting from halfway through Shabbos, was starting to sink into this melancholy, despair, and anxiety of kind of the tone that Slichot was going to set off and this trepidation for Rosh Hashanah. And he felt that he had to teach this fellow a lesson, but in typical Shmuel Munkes fashion, in a way that it comes with a little bit of wit to it. So after Shabbos was over, after Havdalah, a couple hours till midnight, he says, I'm going to go take a nap. He tells this fellow, go wake me up. And the fellow was kind of taken aback. He says, you're going to just go to sleep? You're not going to come and get into the mental state for Slichot? Clearly he thought that Shmuel Munkes was even simpler in terms of the ways of Judaism than he was. So he says, okay. In the meantime, he starts going into this sense of this tizzy of anxiety, and maybe I'm not going to be worthy, and all these things that he thought was the best way to prepare, to say sorry to God, Slichot, sorry. A whole period of saying Slichot before Rosh Hashanah. It comes around midnight to the time to head to the shul, so he goes up to where Rav Shmuel Munkes is sleeping, and he knocks on the door to wake up Rav Shmuel Munkes to come to Slichot. And he knocks on the door and he hears, taken aback. Shmuel's really out cold. So he knocks on the door. Rav Shmuel, wake up! It's time for Slichos. So Rav Shmuel comes to the door. He's rubbing his eyes. Says, "Why are you waking me up? Why do we have to be saying Slichos? What do you mean? How do we not say Slichos? We have to say Slichos because it's not going to be a good year. The cow's not going to give milk. It's going to be. We have to make sure that God. We apologize to God and He forgives us." And Rav Shmuel looked at him and said, "Listen here. Only a baby wakes up in the middle of the night crying for milk." And his point was, this is not what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is not what slichos is about. This is not the relationship we have with God, where unless we say sorry, God's not going to give us the milk.
Right.
What we are doing and preparing for in the month of Elul is something so much deeper and something that's so much more positive. And to define that, we also have to look at the second story of Rav Shmuel. I'm concerned here because we also have a limited time on the Zoom, so I'm going to try to make sure we get it in here. But it's a very powerful story, and you may have heard it. Rav Shmuel, another year, was passing through a town, also in the lead up to Rosh Hashanah. It wasn't the Shabbos of Slichos, but it was one of the Shabbos in the month of Elul. And as he's passing through this town, he notices signs all over the town that the town put enough money together to purchase the services of a Magid, of a preacher, a traveling preacher that would go on Shabbos, give them, like a guest lecturer, he would inspire them and get them into the correct mood in the lead up to Rosh Hashanah. So the town was very proud and happy that they were able to afford bringing in such a preacher and such a Magid, and that he was going to be in the main shul. Everybody's invited to come to the main shul of town to hear him. But Shmuel joins the big crowds, packed shul, and this man gets up in this town full of simple, pure-hearted Jews, and he tears into them. And he says, you are horrible, terrible people who don't know how to serve God. You don't know how to pray properly. You don't know how to learn. You make all these sins because you don't know how to properly do mitzvahs. And by the time he is finished, he's cut them all down. And they walk out of shul in a daze and in a melancholy. Clearly, they're not deserving of Rosh Hashanah. These are simple, pure-hearted Jews that in the face of all the persecution and all the difficulties are still holding steadfast to the Judaism and serving God in the best way they know how, and this man just devastated them. Shmuel was furious. He said, this person needs to be taught a lesson. That Saturday night, Rav Shmuel, this man is sleeping in the inn, sleeping the sleep of the just, this Magid, right, this preacher. When all of a sudden, middle of the night, the door to his room opens and closes, and a shadowy figure walks in, kind of in the darkness of his room, closes the door behind him and locks it. Now this man sits up. This is a little ominous. Some stranger has just walked into the room and locked them both in. What's going on? To make the moment even scarier, as this man produces a butcher knife and begins to silently sharpen it right next to this preacher's bed. And this man now is perplexed and not a little bit scared. And he turns to him and says, Rabbi Yid, my fellow Jew, what are you doing here? Can I help you? And Rabbi Shmuel, who's the one who's sharpening the knife, says, oh, yeah, you could definitely help me. So he says, could you please tell me, how is it that I can help you? He says, well, as you so eloquently pointed out, this is a town full of terrible, terrible sinners. None of us are good. None of us are righteous. And there's this old Jewish tradition that before the high holidays, you have to pray by the graveside of righteous people to advocate, to pray that they should advocate before the throne of glory. Well, as you pointed out, this is a town where not a single one of us are righteous. So there is no such grave. It's a big conundrum. We don't have any righteous people, any grave of righteous people to go pray by. This man probably is just still early, just woken up, so his brain is not, the synapses are not firing. He says, so I don't understand. How is it that I can help? I hear your predicament, but how can I? He says, well, we need the grave of a righteous person. And all of a sudden the man realizes what the Rav Shmuel Munkus is saying. He said, no, I'm not that righteous. Oh, don't be so humble, Rav Shmuel said. You are plenty righteous. You are, as you pointed out, you are so much more righteous than the rest of us. You are so holy and you do mitzvah so much better, etc., etc. You are definitely righteous. You will definitely do for the gravesite of a righteous person. And the man starts saying, oh, no, really, you have to understand, I'm really not that righteous. I promise you, I'm not that righteous. In fact, I've done this and this and this and this. Rav Shmuel says, just that? We don't daven properly. We don't learn properly. We are doing averos all over the place, as you pointed out. You are definitely, with those kind of sins, you are still significantly more righteous than the rest of us. The man says, "No, Reb Shmuel, I've done a lot worse." And he starts to uncover some real things that he's done wrong. But either way, the Shmuel Munkus walked over to him and said, "How dare you? If you are a Jew, but a imperfect Jew, just like the rest of them, and perhaps significantly more imperfect than the rest of them, how can you deprive God of the special meeting between His beloved children, who will choose Him again? And now, because of what you said, they will be coming in with a sense of melancholy and a sense of insignificance, and rather than coming to this as the day of celebration that it is meant to be, a heavy day and an important day, but a day of joy and celebration and optimism, because God wants us to choose Him, which speaks to how precious and how much God cherishes us." That was what the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov re-infused into Judaism. And it's nowhere more apparent than this period of introspection and self-refinement in the month of Elul, that there's many different ways that can be done. But through the lens of Chassidus, through the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe, this is done with a sense of love, of joy, of positivity, and optimism. It's no less comprehensive, and it's no less a period of proper, true self-introspection and refinement. But it comes with a different attitude, not how far away am I from the mark and how much I am undeserving and imperfect, but rather how much better can I become? How if I, to a certain degree, if somebody told me that they were going to give me all the resources necessary to invest in the project that is Sender Gajzinski, how can I make good on that investment? What else? If somebody says they're taking my business and they're going to give me $1 million endowment to go and make this business even better, how would I make the business of Sender Gajzinski better? And that's my sense of, that's what I need to do in the lead up, because I can, because God is investing in me. So whatever it is, we each take a good look at ourselves and say, I am pretty darn good. I am God's child. He loves me, and I'm here for Him, etc., etc. And I'm in the month of Elul, and I want to be better. So how do I make this good product even better, so that I can stand proudly before God and cherish Him the way He clearly cherishes me, and say, God, I once again choose You. That is Chassidus. It's the discipline of introspection, the discipline of refinement, of self-refinement, the discipline of not being satisfied with where you are up until now, but not out of despair and a sense of insignificance, but it says that of joy and pride, I want to be my absolute best when I stand before my beloved God, and He gives me the opportunity to say, I choose You. And that's Chassidus. That's the gift of what the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe reintroduced to Judaism. They brought back the chayos, the vitality, to the month of Elul. That it's not just right, as I said, it's not just the month of Elul. Something that is quintessential in the month of Elul, but it is also in a sense the soundtrack of our entire lives. We are always trying to be better in this relationship with God, not because we're concerned that we're not going to have the milk, and not because we're concerned that we're inadequate, but because we're concerned that if I can be better than I want to be, that this relationship deserves this, the special bond that I share with God where He loves me and I love Him, then of course, there's nothing more that I would want than to do this. That's it. And
Beautiful, Rabbi.
and connecting it with this week's parsha, right? The hayaki tavo al haaretz, right? God says when you arrive at the land, first of all, this parsha is paired off with Parshat Kitetse, right? Last week's Torah portion. When you will go out to war, right? And the going out to war and doing battle, etc., with yourself, right? With your own Yetzer Hara, is so that ultimately, Vayaki Tavo, of this week's verse, that you can arrive, right? But what is it that you're arriving to? You will come to the land and you will cultivate the land. This is you. And you will take of the first fruits of what you produce, the choicest of it, and you will turn to God and you will say, God, I hereby give this on to you. My qualities, why was I working on myself? Why was I trying to, not so I could just be self-satisfied. God, because I was doing this for you, I'm being a better person for you. And I bring up my first fruits to you, God, to the place that you have chosen. And I say to you, God, and I turn and I said, God, I've gotten rid of the bad parts of me, the arti, and I'm bringing up to you my choicest. Hashkifa mimon kachecha min hashamayim uvarech et amcha et Israel, as this parsha says. God, please gaze down and bless your people. We're doing the Anila Dodi, so God, please reciprocate and Vidodili. So that's really, again, let us work hard, let's do battle as it were, so that we can show up on the day of Rosh Hashanah, give God our finest, and then really, in a sense, be deserving for God to reciprocate and bless us with the year that we are all hoping for.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, everybody?
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom and
Shalom.
Shana Tova to everybody.
Shana Tova.
All the best.
Shabbat.